Am I my brother's keeper? The implications of this question by Cain has reverberated down through history. In essence, Cain is asking, do I have a duty to someone other than myself? If we look at basic evolutionary theory, this would suggest that we do not. One of the fundamental tenets is termed the survival of the fittest. The strongest, the healthiest, the most aggressive survive. The weaker animals, the sick animals, the older animals become victims of predators. These weak and diseased animals do not earn the right to mate. Thus, in theory, the strongest ones are the ones who pass on the genetic codes. Thus, according to theory, enhances the chance that the species will survive. This is the way it has been in the primal world and in the animal kingdom. But we suggest things have changed in our society. We live, we say, in a civilized society. We argue that we no longer live according to this principle if we ever did. We give lip service to our responsibility to care for the weaker in our society, the children, the elderly, the disabled, and so on. Yet, is this what happens in practice? Are we really as civilized as we claim to be? Do we not see the powerful oppressing and crushing those who are weaker? How many wars are fought because the stronger nation either wants to destroy or at least control the weaker nation, to impose their will upon them? How many businesses seek to crush their competition? I mean, think, for example, in the last 50 years, the death of, say, a little country store, because the big stores offer things in ways that just make it impossible for the small stores to survive. We see this oppression happening in many forms. The wealthy, the powerful, the influential overwhelm the opportunities for others. And they do so in seeking to attain their own agenda. Sometimes these efforts are couched in euphemisms to diminish the blatancy of the attempts of the stronger to overcome, to crush the weaker. But even now, recently, these have become more blatant. One such, we might call it subtle, but in some ways it's blatant too, one such expression of this survival of the fittest mentality has arisen in these last several decades. It's the argument that we ought to give priority to looking out for ourselves. It has been argued that we have a duty to look out for number one. Even a book has been written about it. Meaning looking out first and foremost for ourselves. This philosophy says that we have a duty to do what's good for ourselves. We have a right to think and seek that what is beneficial to us first and foremost. It's interesting that when anybody exerts these rights about looking out for number one, it is always about their benefit. It's never about wanting to do something for somebody else. That I want to look out for myself by serving others. Never about doing duty or caring for or protecting others from injustice. This drive to look out for number one has led husbands to leave their wives, to go find themselves. Parents who abandon their children so they can fulfill themselves or simply so they can have fun. We can't be burdened with the elderly. We have no duty to those who are poor and needy. They're on their own. They've made their own beds. Let them sleep in it. We have every right to possess every toy that we want. In a book called The Practice, John Mark Comer says, the irony of our be true to yourself culture is that everyone ends up looking the same. We devolve to our base animal instincts for self-preservation and pleasure. Greed, gluttony, immorality, lies, power games. It's the same story on repeat. From Homer's Iliad to the morning news. In the book, Covenant and Conversation, that we've been talking about off and on through this series, Rabbi Sachs suggests this be true to yourself movement lacks moral responsibility. Last week we talked about 2 weeks ago we talked about Adam and Eve, the failure to accept personal responsibility. They disobeyed God, and when God challenged them, they pointed at somebody else and said it was their fault. Sachs argues that Cain does not do this. Rather, he acknowledges his actions, but denied that he was wrong in doing what he did. Sachs writes, Cain does not deny personal responsibility. He does not say it wasn't me. He denies moral responsibility. I am not my brother's keeper. I am not responsible for his safety. Yes, I did it because I felt like it. Cain has not yet learned the difference between I can and I may. See, in our individualistic, self-focused society, one we are emphasizing to be true to ourselves, we can gamble our life savings away and leave our family without money because I can do it. We can demand an abortion under any circumstances because the fetus isn't important. We can use drugs, we can drink alcohol in excess, even if it leads us to ignoring our children, because I can. We can look at inappropriate images even though it demeans women and disrespects our spouse. We can destroy the environment to increase our wealth. These are all things that we can do, and if we can do it, it's okay to do it. But Scripture is quite clear. Not everything we can do, we may do. We owe a duty not to ourselves, though in some ways we do. There's a truth in this. But we also have a duty to other human beings and to God. This is the essence of moral responsibility. We have a responsibility to do the right things in God's eyes and what is good and beneficial for others. So as we come to Cain's story, the story begins with Cain and Abel bringing an offering to God. Abel's is accepted and Cain's is rejected. We're not told precisely the basis upon which this judgment is based, but Jonathan Sachs offers one viable explanation. He says the reason God rejected Cain's offering becomes clear in the words stated immediately after. Cain became angry and depressed. Imagine the following. You offer someone a gift. Politely, they refuse it. How do you respond? There are two possibilities. You can ask yourself what I did wrong, or you can be angry with the intended recipient. If you respond in the first way, you were generally trying to please the other person. If in the second, it becomes retrospectively clear that your concern was not with the other, but with yourself. So in other words, Cain's offering wasn't wrong, but his attitude, his way of giving was wrong. And so that's what led to the rejection. And we can see that played out because there's no point where Cain says, oh, maybe I should have done something differently. In that way, kind of following the model of his parents. But whether or not any of that speculation is true, clearly, according to this account, the rejection that Cain receives leads him to become angry. He didn't inquire what was wrong. As I said, like his parents before him, he refuses to take responsibility. He doesn't need to change. It's not his fault. Instead, he becomes angry at God for rejecting his offer. And then he transfers. There's a term called transfers in counseling, where somebody takes their anger or their frustration and places it upon the therapist. In this case, the transference is, I'm angry at God, I can't reach God, so I look to someone upon whom to inflict my anger. And that is Abel. His offering was accepted. Cain is jealous. His anger turns quickly to him, so he invites him out into the field, and there he attacks him and kills him. As with Adam and Eve, God comes and confronts Cain. Again, Cain doesn't deny what he's done. Rather, he in essence says, it's not my responsibility. Am I my brother's keeper? I don't think so. Do I have a responsibility to treat him well and not harm him? I don't think so. Am I free to do what I want? Yes, I think so. You see, if we go back to that evolutionary theory, we might think of Cain looking at Abel and saying, well, if he was stronger or smarter or more aware, I wouldn't have been able to do it to him. It's his fault for not being the person that could defend himself. He is weak, and he got what he deserved. I'm the stronger, smarter, better motivated. I could do it, and I did. You see, in this stronger, dog-eat-dog world, it is the fittest who survive. And I, Cain, am going to be the fittest one. He harmed me, and I was just defending myself. Obviously, God doesn't accept this defense. He demonstrates this by his response that we do have a responsibility to do what is right in the eyes of God, to do the moral thing. We must restrain our impulses. Therefore, God relates to the consequences. And listen to Cain's response, because I think it applies to how our society in its individualism and its looking out for ourselves live. They're driven from the land, he says, hidden from God's presence, doomed to restless wandering. This urge, this desire, this calling to look out for ourselves eventually leaves us on our own, alone, restless wanderer, hidden from God's presence. And quite honestly, no place really to abide, because it's all about us. It hurts every relationship. You see, we are adrift in a sea of people who lack moral responsibility. As a result, our society is unstable. We are unaware of God in our lives, and we so often are like Cain, wandering restlessly through life. In many ways, we're repeating the Cain and Abel story all the time. But God doesn't leave us there. The Jewish theologians and rabbis don't leave us there. How do we break this cycle? As with Adam and Eve, the rabbis suggest that we look at the example of Abraham. He is one who shows not only personal responsibility. When God said go, he went. He now shows it by this moral responsibility, and it comes in his relationship with Lot. If you remember Lot was his nephew. He left with Abraham. They came to the promised land, but there in the promised land, their flocks become too big. They begin to argue with each other. So Abraham says, let's split. Let's go apart. And he gives Lot the choice of the land. And Lot sees the well-watered plain of Sodom and Gomorrah, and he chooses that. He chooses the best of the land, even though Abraham was the chosen one. And so he goes down and he settles near Sodom and Gomorrah, and there he becomes corrupt. There, things go badly for him. Sodom and Gomorrah are attacked by other kings in the area, and all his possessions are taken captive. Lot has made poor choices. Abraham could have taken offense at Lot's choices. So when this war breaks out, Lot is taken captive. Abraham could have sat back and said, well, he got what he deserved. I'm looking out for myself. You know, Cain was angry at Abel, even though Abel didn't do anything to be angry for. But Lot did some things that Abraham could have taken offense at. But not Abraham. Abraham recognizes that he is his brother's keeper, or in this case, his brother's son keeper. He had a duty to Lot and a duty to God. As a result, he risks himself and his household. He goes and he pursues Lot's capture and frees Lot and brings him back. Abraham took personal responsibility. Abraham took moral responsibility to take care of his brother, if we want to say it in the Cain statement, of his nephew. You see, we live in a world that is ever ready to speak of their duty to themselves. We believe in freedom. We believe in individualism. We believe that we should be able to do whatever we want for ourselves. And so often that involves not considering our obligation to others. Like Cain, we assume that if I can do it, I'm allowed to do it. But Abraham offers us an alternative approach. He is willing to look out for the welfare of others. And this is exactly what the Apostle Paul says in a statement that is so clear that he describes what it is, our moral responsibility to God and to others. In Philippians chapter 2, he says, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but to each of you to the interest of others. That's what Abraham did. As Paul will go on, that's what Jesus did. Moral responsibility says we have a duty and responsibility to obey God and seek the welfare of others. We need to exemplify that in a society that's lost in seeking its own interests and welfare. Amen.